Right, this is about vocal vibrato in early music, part 1, Introduction and Rationale. Hello, this video is an extended version of my presentation at the University of York Singing Conference in July 2009. My theme is vocal vibrato, and the main question I want to address is this: does the evidence suggest that singers should use it in early music? And a secondary issue: do listeners actually want to hear it, the vibrato that is, and did they ever like it? In this introduction, I'll go into the rationale for my talk, and my starting point is, why did NEMA, which is National Early Music Association, why did NEMA lay on the conference in the first place, in cooperation with the University of York? I think I can answer that in a single word: disappointment. We in the NEMA Council really feel that most early music singing is historically uninformed. We're unhappy with it to a degree, with the vocal sound and style. I say with a degree because obviously the level of satisfaction varies. In my case it's very high indeed. Others are slightly milder in their views. But we all agree that after 60 years of historically informed practice, the one-size-fits-all operatic voice with a wide vibrato reigns supreme. It is really unsatisfactory, and it sticks out like a sore thumb in concerted music involving voices and instruments. Just look for a moment at what's happened in terms of, let's compare the instrumental and vocal practice over the last 60 years. As you can see, I'm quite old, and my involvement in early music started in the year of 1951. So I can attest to events which have taken place since then, because I've been involved with many of the protagonists. During that time, the harpsichord, such as the one on the left, the lute, strings, flutes, recorders, single and double reed wind, brass instruments, the playing of all these instruments has been totally transformed. We have some marvellous performers on those instruments. Also, performance with instrument making, which was preceded by leaps and bounds. Now, my video man has placed me together with some of my instruments because he thought he made a nice picture. However, it's also there for a reason, because I'm involved now at an amateur level in music making on a regular basis, and I have flute players who come round and play with me regularly, and we all of us have completely authentic instruments, like the instruments here. My flute players are absolutely fanatical about getting everything absolutely right. They know their quants and hossatir backwards. So, it's got down even to an amateur level. And as I say, if we're looking at instrument making, my harpsichord was based upon an instrument made in Florence around 1760 by Malcolm Rose. My treble viol on there by Michael Bishop, and the treble recorder by a Dutch make. They've all been, I think the ethos behind the manufacture of these instruments, I can summarise in one word: integrity. It's all about dedication, research, and above all, not cutting corners or modernising, because people have found that if you try and play with a moderniser harpsichord, you end up with a much worse result than an authentic instrument constructed along original lines. Anyway, so much for instruments, that really that picture has been totally transformed. It's not absolutely perfect. For example, if you look at solo and ensemble string playing, especially classical string quartets, they tend to be too loud, too vibratory, and too strenuous. But singers are the real problem. Why? Because, frankly, they have just refused to cooperate in the HIP revolution. If you talk to singers, they say, well, of course you're lucky as instrumentalists, you've got the artifacts, so you've got something to go on, but we really don't know how they sang, so I'm going to sing the way I was trained. In other words, I'm not going to change. There were some attempts at reform in the 60s and 70s. Emma Kirkby and a few others revived more authentic styles. And there was good work by a number of individuals and ensembles which has taken place, mainly in the medieval and Renaissance repertoires. But as for Baroque and later, not many attempts at reform that I'm aware of. Why is that? And I think it's interesting to, one thing we can do is, if you consider the specialities of early music directors in the UK, around about the time I was working semi-professionally in the late 60s and 70s, Carl Dolmetsch, David Munro, Bernard Thomas, all of them recorder players. Thurston Dart, John Beckett, Christopher Hogwood, Peter Holman, all of them harpsichordists. Michael Morrow, Anthony Rooley, lucenists. They're all instrumentalists, except possibly Andrew Parrott. He might have been a vocalist, but I think his main work when he was at university was playing bass electric guitar. So it's not surprising that a number of them didn't make very much progress at getting their singers to try more authentic styles. One of them did try very hard, and I remember that was Michael Morrow, who ran Musica Reservata with John Beckett. I can tell you a story of, basically, before every concert, there was a last-minute panic because half the music hadn't been copied out. So I would go around to his house and we would be copying music till 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And his chief moan, really, was the problem with vibrato and his singers. He said, they won't do it. They won't cooperate. They won't, he really wanted to get rid of vibrato. He was successful to some extent with Jantina Norman, but the problem is that she had a sort of shouting style which was only good for some of the repertoire. He didn't really have much success with singers who to sing in a quieter, sweeter style of singing. And in fact, I know that his singers, were unhappy about it as well, because one of them was actually overheard once in the pub after a gig to say, he wants us to sing like wogs. So, you know, the singers were dead against it. And really there wasn't any real progress. People talk about the progress made, but the only really real success was the outstanding work done by Emma Kirkby. So we've got a problem. Singing now is as bad as it was in 1950. For example, take Rossini's beautiful operas. Apart from some of the tub-thumping choruses, much of it is very delicate music. It requires beautiful singing, a lot of attention to detail, no shouting or screeching. But that's exactly what goes on now. And I really find it most upsetting to hear the total destruction of the music, no historically performed practice, is never performed in fact, only vandalised. Tenors, for example, belt out top A's, B's and C's from the chest, not in delicate falsetto as they did in the early 19th century, and as some pop singers do now. Massive vibratos oscillating a minor third from peak to trough are routine. Both faults were expressly condemned by Rossini. It's simply not good enough. We must reform, hence why we've got the conference, why we did the conference, and why I'm giving this talk in particular. So much for the rationale. I'll outline now briefly the structure and content of the conference. The structure is basically chronological. It's divided into several sections, each of which can be accessed separately and downloaded from this website. Okay, in section 2, I'm going to summarise the contemporary evidence on vocal technique with particular reference to vibrato from the Renaissance, Baroque, early classical and early romantic periods. And I'll take in the conclusions of musicologists based upon this evidence. You can see there's a pile of books over there which I'll be using in section 2. I'll then be doing section 3. This focuses on the 19th century, when it is generally believed that vocal vibrato started. But there's no conclusive scholarship suggesting exactly when. I've had a go at this work. My main sources are the online text databases of newspapers and journals, mainly opera and concert reviews. So far I've identified over 4,000 sources, mostly of named singers, on their use or non-use of vibrato. The results throw fresh light on which singers introduce vibrato at which times. Section 4. I'm now going into the 20th century. This is obviously quite different from previous periods. We don't need books or musicologists so much, simply because there's a huge number of recordings which now form a vital part of the historical record. For example, if in a couple of centuries' time we wanted to perform Britain's operas in a historically informed way, we just simply go back to the records made with Peter Pears and other singers personally selected by Britain. Now, as I've said, 20th century classical singers have gone astray in early music. They are no longer our best models. Fortunately, some jazz and pop singers have innate good taste and have rediscovered many lost techniques in an entirely unself-conscious way. They're our best models for the future. I'll be playing and commenting on songs by two singers, Betty Carter and Kelly Sweet. Finally, I'll be tackling section 5, which takes us up to the present time in the 21st century. We promised in the conference prospectus to include an experiment. In fact, we did too. First, I conducted a survey of early music fans for NEMA. This included a question on vocal preferences. In my presentation at the conference itself, I played examples of University of York postgraduate student Pei Chen singing a Handel aria in 3 styles, and I then got delegates to vote on their preferences. I report on the voting results of both surveys. Finally, in section 6, I conclude briefly with some thoughts on where we should go from here, but I do make one disclaimer at this point. All of the views expressed in these talks are mine and can't be attributed to any my other NEMA colleagues.